Anybody else on the line that we haven't identified?
Hi, this is Leslie with Olympus.
I got Mike Maxwell.
Yep. And Leslie Simpson with OPHCC.
Jorge Rivera with Molina Healthcare.
Kat Latte, CHPW.
Mark Ozias, Clallam County Commissioner.
Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the call? We'll go ahead and get started then. We've got a proposed agenda as emailed to us on Sunday, I believe it was, the most recent one. Does that sound right, staff? And I'll entertain a motion. I'm going to just assume that we're going to approve the agenda unless someone wants to comment on it now. Try to save us a little bit of grief on the voting process. Anybody opposed to approving the agenda? A little bit of an inverted approach today. The next item is the consent agenda, and I'll make a similar action. Anybody want any of those items pulled off the agenda for more discussion? Anybody opposed to passing the consent agenda? This is working great. Okay, we've passed the first two items. The third item is a plan to prepare for the integration of managed care, and I understand that staff and Commissioner Ozias are going to review this. We have an SBAR in support of that IMC transition in our packets. Elda, you want to set this up?
Yes, I'll set this up and hand it over to Commissioner Ozias. So in your packet is an SBAR that has been reviewed by both Stephanie Lewis and Commissioner Ozias. Commissioner Ozias is a Clallam commissioner and also the chair of the Salish Behavioral Health Organization Executive Board, and he's going to be speaking to us a little bit about this. The SBAR has also been shared with the mental health sector representatives on the board and the substance use disorder treatment provider representatives on the board, and has their support. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Commissioner Ozias.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And hello, OCH board. I wanted to thank you again for considering hosting or accepting this position. We're really thinking of it as a project manager, and I think it's really important if we're going to have any shot of having a successful integration here over the next year. And we've talked about how much work the SBHO staff has to do with helping to affect the transition while still managing the ongoing work of the BHO, and so we really thought that having someone whose sole focus was helping to coordinate between providers and the MCOs was going to be vital, and that model has been implemented in a couple of other areas. So, of course, in addition to figuring out who will actually employ that person, the big question is, how will that person's salary be funded? And we've been working on a variety of options there. It looks like we'll be able to put approximately half of the salary together, at least by our latest estimates, from SBHO funds. I have been working in conjunction with others with the Healthcare Authority, both to identify what resource they may have to bring, as well as helping to work with the MCOs to see if they can identify any resource to bring. And if there remains a shortfall between where we need to be and where we're at in terms of funding, then I believe that between the three counties, we would come up with funding from either our 1/10 of 1% pools or perhaps even general fund dollars in some combination to fund the rest. So I want to underscore that we all have a vested interest in trying to make this work. We think this is the best chance to really help us stay on track, and I think the funding is there to do it. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Of course, Stephanie Lewis is also in a position to probably help provide some helpful information as are your own staff members.
All right. Well, thank you. So I'm wondering if members have had a chance to look at that SBAR that's in the packet. Stephanie, I don't know if you'd like to offer the proposed motion for discussion first, or if members would rather have discussion before we have the motion. I think it'd be good to have the motion on the floor if you're willing to do that.
Yes, thank you. I would like to propose a motion that the board authorizes the executive director to negotiate a reasonable and binding agreement that defines the scope of work and the parties to transition to IMC, assuming that the associated compensation assuming that associated compensation can be determined, and the agreement is contingent on secured funding, as Commissioner Zayas just outlined.
Thank you. We got a second on that?
Second.
We got a second?
Good deal.
All right, thank you. So that's a motion on the floor and a second. Any more discussion around that SBAR? Any of the content?
And Roy,
Go ahead, Maggie.
yeah, that we're having some comments coming in on the chat. Do you have access to the chat?
I don't.
Okay. The first was a request to repeat the motion, and then from Jennifer Kreidler-Moss, do BHCD and how do the BHCD and MCO sectors feel about this plan?
Roy, would you like me to repeat the motion?
Yes, please. Yes, that would be great.
So, requesting that the board authorizes the executive director to negotiate a reasonable and binding agreement that defines a scope of work to assist involved parties in the transition to integrated managed care, as well as negotiating the associated compensation. The agreement is contingent upon securing funding from external sources to cover OCH costs.
So generally, the motion is as presented by staff, correct?
Yes.
So people should have a hard copy of that in their packet. And then the second part of the question, as I understand it, was how did members of the sector feel about that? And I think Elia had reported that there was support. I don't know if there's more comment on that.
So this is Elia. So the mental health sector got back to me, and representatives from the SUD sector got back to me. I haven't heard back from the MCO sector, but they are on the phone, and I did kind of prod them that they may be asked to speak on whether or not they're supportive of this motion.
Hi, this is Laura. Can you hear me all right? From United
Yes.
Healthcare?
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm just confused because from the original SBAR, it's reading different than the slide you have up. Because I know we did have some concerns about the IMC transition, where you specifically called out all 5 MCOs, although there won't be 5 in the region. But I'm not seeing that in the same slide here that you have up regarding support of IMC at transition.
The SBAR and the recommendations that's up on the slide was revised by the executive committee last week, so it's slightly different than the one I sent to the MCOs a few weeks ago. So that might be the confusion.
That may
got a little more detail in it.
Yeah, because the one I was looking at specifically talked about finding funding, and that HCA, SCHO, and MCOs agreed to assist in identifying funding and covering costs, and so we just want to be more specific about the ask there. And then, like I said, initially it has all 5 MCOs stated where, you know, that 4 will be in the region. So there was some concern around that, but it looks like that now has been changed. So that would have been our concerns there.
Do you have the most current packet that was sent out? I think that would be good if you did.
You know, I should have. I was looking at the one from last week, but yeah.
It would have been attached to the invite for the calendar appointment today?
Right. I'll go back and check here, Joe.
Okay, I just want to make sure everyone has a chance to know exactly what we're voting on. Any more discussion on that motion?
Maggie, did you see there was another comment in the chat box from Jennifer?
Yeah, so the comments in the staff or in the chat box are, this is the OCH staff temp position for 2019 only. The answer to that question is that it would extend a little bit into 2020, kind of to wrap up the project, but that we're planning for this position for 1 year. And then Stephanie just saying she got disconnected but is calling back in.
Good to know.
This is Laura
Any
again.
more?
I didn't know. Just wanted to let you guys
go
know
ahead.
we are okay. Yeah, we're okay moving forward on that.
Okay, thank you.
For discussion online. Yep, thank you.
Any more discussion on this motion? People ready to act on it? I want to call the question. Anybody want to call the question?
I'll call the question.
All right, thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate the opportunity to help out and work together on this. I think it'll be a good effort.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roy, and thank you, OCH board. We're really hopeful that this person, in addition to everyone else, is going to give us the horsepower we need to be as successful as possible here. And thank you very much to all of you for your continued leadership. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Okay, stay safe.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
All right, the next item on the agenda relates to the proposed 2019 MTD payment model. And
Then this is over to you.
Yeah, go ahead, Elia.
Yeah, okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. I am going to walk through the two SBARs that are in your packet. The first one, they're kind of nested, so I realize it might be confusing why we're doing them one order at a time. It might feel a little disjointed, but it's because in order to approve the MPP payment, we have to first approve the CBOS funds model. So just kind of to set the frame here, I'm focusing, I'm getting a little bit of background noise. It sounds like somebody's cutting with scissors or something. So if you're not talking, if you could please mute your line. So just to kind of set the frame of what we're talking about with the CBOS payment, the total funds available for CBOS partners across the entire MPP period is $1.4 million. And I just wanted to kind of set that because it's quite smaller than the pool for the physical health and behavioral health providers in the hospitals. And the total funds available for CBOS partners to earn in 2019 based on our model is $300,000. So a few other points that are worthy of mention is the CBOS funds model is just, we went through this with the PHBH partners, and it's a high-level plan just to establish the total earnable funds for each partner. The breadth and scope of CBOS implementation partners is quite different. and our physical health and behavioral health partners, in that there's quite a few very niche services that are delivered across the entire region, and to have one sort of model that completely mimics the, somebody says I'm breaking up. Okay, hopefully that's better. So let me know, Stephanie, if that's not better. To have one model across the CBOS partners really didn't make sense. So after the last board meeting and also leading up to the last board meeting, staff spent a good deal of time really thinking about how to make this work. And what we're proposing today is really our best effort. Oh, it just says that is work. I hope it's not a TNT thing. I don't know what to do. So, Miranda, can you hear me?
That's much better. No, that's much better now. That's much better.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, what we're trying to do here is we put a lot of thinking into this and really trying to find the best model forward. So this next slide just shows you what the board approved related to CBOS partners in October of 2018 and the crosswalk to what we're asking for now. And if you back up into what's in the SBAR, you'll also see on a step-by-step basis how this current model addresses the three major concerns that were raised in the December board meeting. So just to summarize it quickly, and this is going to come up again when we talk about the bigger MPP payment model, there are two drivers at play. For CBOS, the first one is scale. And for scale, for the CBOs, this really depends on how well the change plans drive those 14 core measures. And for clinical community linkage, that's really the defining factor for scope. And staff have developed a module to be able to measure community clinical linkage, and we're piloting that. And it's really getting at the goal of the Medicaid Transformation Project, which is to, you know, among the other things that we're trying to do around access and integration is to improve the community clinical linkages between physical health, behavioral health, and social service agencies. So a few other factors that you may have picked up on in this SBAR: for CBOs, funds are available by region, not by NCC, and a partner's impact on the 14 core measures is based on their submitted change plans. And this table here that's displaying kind of shows you how that enumeration works. So for first step, for example, and this is just an excerpt, you see first step organization, which is nonprofit. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so if you're not on mute, can you please mute your phone? Thank you. So the first step shows you it's a nonprofit organization out in Clallam County that does a bunch of stuff, and this first line shows you kind of how first step would get points, if you will, for how they're driving the core measures. And then some other ones are listed there as well. So in terms of how this works at a high level, and I'd like to thank Phil Romano for this beautiful piggy balloon image. Here are our CBOS partners. The regional pool available to CBOS partners, as I mentioned before, is about $1.4 million. It is divvied up based on scale, which is defined as core measure impact, and scope, which is defined as clinical community linkage. And just like physical health and behavioral health partners, over time, the relative attribution of scale and scope changes, so that as you move forward, we are prioritizing the extent to which CBO partners are strengthening and creating new clinical community linkages. So that's the overview, and I'd like to state just, you know, parenthetically that staff had many very deep conversations after the last board meeting and really thought hard about how to address some of the very valid concerns that were raised by the board while still, you know, not letting perfection be the enemy of the good and trying to get funds out. So what we presented here really represents our best thinking. And we shared this with the executive committee last week, and the SBAR includes this motion here, which says the board approves the 2019 NTP funds model for CBOS implementation partners. And with that, Roy, I will pause and see if there are questions, comments, discussion.
Hi, this is Leslie with OCHCC, and I actually did have a question with the new funds model. Has any of this been proposed or laid out or shown to the CBOS partners?
Hi, Leslie. Yes, we've shared this with 2 of our CBOS partners, Kitsap Public Health District and OCH. And I think Dale is on the phone and on point to answer questions or respond to that. Dale, if you can hear me and you're able to, do you want to comment on your reaction to this model?
Yeah, in a nutshell, it's workable and it's doable. I mean, it isn't perfect, but it's at least from the CBO standpoint. But it certainly integrates the funding mechanism and aligns it with where we're going and what needs to happen on the other side. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dale.
Is that a motion? Did somebody, do we want to have more action on the motion and then some more discussion?
I would certainly make a motion that the board approves the 2019 MTP funds model for CBOS implementation partners.
This is Joe. I second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? This is an important discussion. Anything in the chat box?
There is a request about, will it be possible to get a copy of today's PowerPoint slides? To which I would answer, absolutely. Email any one of OCH staff and we will get those sent to you if you didn't already receive them. And we're also recording this board meeting and we'll post it.
So, Elia, is what you're voting on an approval for 2019 funds, or is this an approval for the whole term of the project funds?
So what's proposed here is a 2019 funds for CBO partners, and you'll see the thinking of how this will the motion is for 2019. The SBAR includes a sketch of what the entire MTP will look like through 2023.
Okay.
Any more discussion on the motion? Somebody want to call a question?
Question.
All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 I think I abstain, this is Dale, just because I think I have interest in this.
I'll get there. Any of those opposed say nay? Any abstentions? Dale?
Yeah.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item.
All right, moving along. So this is Ellie, everybody, and I'm going to move on to the next SBAR in this agenda item, which is the entire MTP payment for 2019. And what we're really trying to do here is get this, get the 2019 payment model approved. And split into two motions, and you'll understand why. The first one is pretty well nutted out, but the second one is more of a higher level model that requires a little bit more thinking. So as with the 2018 payment, in 2019 for physical health and behavioral health partners and CBOS partners, we are using the scale and scope method, where 60% is scale and 40% is scope. And as you see in the SBAR, scale for the PHBH does not change. I'm getting a little bit of paper rustling still, so if you're not talking, if you could please mute your end, thank you. Thank you. So PHBH here, what we're really talking about now, the big update from last year is we have further refined our measurement of scope. And you see in this table in the slide, it's also your second table in your SBAR, how we have split out the scope into different elements and how that relates between CBOS and physical health and behavioral health partners. And so it's essentially a point system where scope makes up 40%, and it's broken up into these categories in a point system. So that's the first big part. So basically we'll use the same way we measured scale last year with the changes in CBOS that we just approved, and scope will be measured according to this table.
So you'd like us to take action on each motion separately?
I think that makes sense, Roy, if that's okay. And so we can get the discussion done with this one before we move on to the bonus pool.
Somebody like to support that motion?
So this is Joe. I'll move that the board approves the 2019 MTP payment model as recommended from the staff.
This is Gail. I'll second.
David, I'll second.
All right, we got 2 seconds on that. Thank you. Any more discussion on that first proposed motion that was presented by staff on page 27 of the packet? Any more discussion? Is there anything in the chat box?
Chat is clear.
All right, a new takeoff for landing thing. Okay. Anybody want to call a question?
Question.
All right, all those in favor of this first proposed motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, the first motion carries. The second motion, do you want to describe it a bit, Elia?
Yeah. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit more fun. When, not that the other stuff wasn't fun, sorry. When Dan Vicini modeled all this, he modeled it with the hope that there would be bonus funds. And as it turns out, there are bonus funds. And bonus funds are going to come from 2 places. The first place they're going to come from is unbudgeted DSRIP revenue. So what does that mean? That means when we did all of our fund flow model, we made certain assumptions. Those assumptions were that we only earn 90% of P for R and 25% of P for P. What's actually happened, and I think will continue to happen, is we've earned 100% of P for R. The P for P earnings won't be until 2020. So already we have about $660,000 of unbudgeted DSRIP revenue. Oh shoot, I'm breaking up again. Okay, I'm going to stand over by the window. I wonder if this is the same AT&T thing that's happening in Squim. So can you hear me better, Miranda?
Not really.
Okay, I'll keep going. Sorry. No. Thanks, Mike.
Sure, that's good.
Okay, I'm standing by my window. This is awesome. I've just got to say I love rural Washington. I'm now going without my notes, so now you guys could see how I roll. The other piece of this is, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, there is a chance that some of the money that was planned to be split up to the implementation partners might not make it out. So this could happen for a variety of reasons. It could happen because of, partners back out. They maybe have withholds or performance issues. So there may be additional funds that are unbudgeted that we don't want to sit on, because when they are in the financial executor portal, we are unable to earn interest on them and they don't do us any good. So with that, we have this plan for a bonus pool, and the bonus pool is comprised of two parts, where 80% goes to performance and 20% goes to technical assistance. And the thinking with the technical assistance is that some of our partners may be not performing because they lack the bandwidth and breadth and capital to be able to make the transformations happen, and may just need more TA, whether that's TA from Olympic or it's TA that can be contracted out with other vendors that is much more targeted and technical in nature. The larger portion of the bonus pool is for performance, and this is broken up into 4 areas. The first is qualitative, which those of you who are in ORCA or able to get into ORCA will know these are drop-down boxes. And essentially what we are trying to do and what OCH gets incentivized for is fully sustained and implemented projects. So we want to pass on, as we earn our P4R in the outer years, we want to pass out that bonus to the organizations that are fully implemented and sustaining. So that's the first part. The second part is related to performance, and the performance measurement and evaluation committee came up with intermediary measures, and those are getting loaded into Lumen now. And we're going to have to work on and work with PMEC, the Performance Measurement and Evaluation Committee, on how to track performance. But we're really looking at performance over self, over time. So rather than comparing one partner to another, it's really improvement over self that we're trying to drive towards. The third element is scale, and we talk about this all the time, and I think this, we heard loud and clear that scale and access was one of the most important parts of this Medicaid transformation project. So we are actually thinking that some of the bonus money will go towards increasing access, and not just for our physical health and behavioral health partners, but also for our CBOS partners within their service lines. And last, and certainly not least, we go back to this concept of community and clinical linkages and finding ways to strengthen and increase those linkages so that there's more connection between physical health, behavioral health, and community-based organizations. So that's the thinking, and I'll stop there to see if there is discussion.
Thank you. In a discussion, shall we move the motion and then have discussion? Anybody interested in passing or proposing the second proposed motion on page 27?
I think we should move if we're going to have a discussion. So I'll move to approve the bonus pool as discussed.
I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. Discussion? Anything in the chat box? guess in a way, I'm wondering if the 20% is the right proportion for technical assistance if we really find that a lot of organizations are having trouble being able to participate effectively. But we'll see how that goes, and we can obviously make changes in the future if we'd like to. Any more discussion? All right. Nothing in the chat box. Anybody want to call a question?
I'll call it.
All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you all. Let me get back to the top of the agenda here. See, what's next? There we go. So let's see, we got an MTD compliance policy discussion. So that's Maggie and Stephanie. Is that still on? It's still on the docket here. Elia, do you want to set that up?
Yeah, I'll set this up and I'll pass it on to Maggie and Stephanie to see if we could at least take it a little bit further down the field. So essentially, there has been, since this SBAR went out, several board members have expressed some concern about not being able to have this policy discussed in person in more, normal circumstances where we have time and we could all sit around a table together. Essentially, what's going on here is that OCH has a contract with all of our implementation partners that clearly stipulates that the funds are contingent on these various factors. And what we found, of course, is after the money went out, it was difficult in some circumstances to get partners reporting and submitting deliverables and communicating with staff in a timely manner. So we want to create some lane lines, or at least have the board help us create some lane lines in a policy under which the staff can work with partners that's reasonable and fair and can help us get the work done. So that's the kind of the tee up for this conversation. I don't know how far it can go. I do know that from a staff perspective, having some sort of clarity from the board on how to treat compliance will give us the policy that we need then to go and communicate directly with our partners. And in terms of timeline, we have our Natural Community of Care convening the end of this month, and it would be great if we can communicate something with them. It may not be an approved policy, but it will be, something that at least can communicate that the board is working on, working with staff to come up with a policy to govern compliance for the MTP work. And I will turn it over to Maggie. I don't know, or Roy, do we want to run through this as an agenda item as we normally would, or?
Well, we did approve the agenda with it on there, and I think if we're going to have a robust discussion, it should be in the context of a motion. Now, members may choose to table it after discussion for the reasons that you described, but I think we should actually have the motion on the table if we're going to have discussion on it. So I'm wondering if there's anybody who wants to make a motion, either the proposed motion that there is or some other motion in relationship to the compliance policy.
Can you recommend a motion and just talk about it? Is that doable?
Well, I think we go ahead.
Yeah, that works.
So what's it say now, Elia?
It says that the board approves a motion to discuss the compliance policy.
All right.
I would make that. So that's me.
Second on that motion?
I'll second that.
All right, so there's a motion on the table to discuss the MTP compliance policy. What we have heard from other members is that they felt that it was important to have structure around this, but this is so new and it isn't clear, and that they thought that there was more intended give and take of technical assistance from staff on this issue. And I don't know a lot of the detail, but that's what I gathered from prior conversation, if that helps to seed discussion.
And as far as our contract management and compliance committee, I'm not sure if we lost Stephanie. It looked like she might have been kicked off.
She did, yeah. Stephanie actually texted me. She lost internet at her house.
Oh, I see. But we do have Caitlin Safford now on the phone. She wasn't originally planning to be at this board meeting. So, Caitlin, if you have comments. And we do have a question in the chat, which is, do we have a sense from change plan recipients of the main drivers of non-compliance to reporting to date? And that would be a question I would pass to Miranda or Jurie.
Jurie, would you like to answer that, or do you want me to? I'm not sure if Jurie has access to her audio right now, but if you get it, Jurie, you can please jump in. But this is Miranda. To answer your question, Katie, the main drivers for reporting to date really came down to barriers with it being the first time that partners were completing the reporting. So I think it would be that on that side, the technical assistance needed to figure out how to operate Orca and the time, being able to set aside the time to be able to complete that reporting, especially with it being the first time. So we're hoping for smoother sailing moving forward with the reporting, but recognizing that there might be some, as we move forward with the intermediary metrics and other aspects of the reporting, that there might be more technical assistance needed to help those partners who need that.
This is Hillary. So with that comment said, I think it's important to point out that it isn't a lack of paying attention or a lack of caring, but rather growing pains. And when I read the compliance policy, the components in there felt pretty harsh, especially when it came down to the actual numbers and the penalty component, when really it's technical assistance or capacity that is causing the pause. Not, if you asked folks who didn't comply initially, if you ask them, do you care and are you paying attention? Generally, yes, would be the answer. So I think some way to, if the risk is that there's not the technical skill or understanding the how, or maybe just needing a little bit of extra help, that's the first place that we go. One of the decisions when we were deciding what positions would be part of the OCH's budget was making sure that we had folks to really partner with our participants and our members in each sector. And so I'd hope to see that if we aren't meeting the requirements, that the first step would be some type of outreach. And if the member isn't responsive to efforts for us to reach out, and I maybe we need to be more specific with what that means, then that would be kind of step one. If we're looking at money, if I speak on behalf of Jefferson Healthcare, if 5% or 25% of our money would go away because I either wasn't doing a good enough job managing my email, or if for some reason I didn't understand that it was a request that would kind of have dollars attached to it, that feels like a really harsh penalty. So I think there's an opportunity for us to build in more of a support system on the front end, and really outline what the challenges would be and how we would respond before going straight to, even if speaking for the primary care component, 25% of that's an FTE that I would have to cut from our budget, if not two.
Hi, this is Julie. Can everyone hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So thanks, Hillary, for those comments. And I do want to make sure everyone knows that our first step has been outreach, because we do understand that it is, so far it has been mostly that people's inboxes are getting too full and they don't realize the deadline. So I think we definitely do that part, and we'll be continuing to do that part. I think this policy came up for discussion with staff and our need to create it, because once we do follow through with all those outreach steps and partners are still non-responsive, then there was no policy in place or any leverage we had or anything we could do if we were saying, we extended the deadline, do you need help? We'll come on site to help. But I think mainly because it's hard because there are so many other priorities for many organizations, we don't know how to get it back up to a priority if we're waiting for reports to come in and deadlines to be met so that we can schedule payments. So yeah, those would be my comments in terms of why staff felt there should be a policy in place.
Yeah, I don't doubt that you guys have reached out to anybody. I'd like to see it formally, what those steps would be in the policy, just so if it wasn't, you and folks that are already here, when you know how much you've reached out, having that reflected in the policy would be helpful. I don't doubt that it's happening.
And I do want to address a question that came up in the chat from Katie, which is if funding were withheld as proposed, would the agency be able to earn funds back when they complete the report? The answer to that question, according to this policy, the partner wouldn't necessarily be able to earn the funds back directly, but that once we've kind of, and we didn't necessarily lay out how this would go, but essentially the funds would be held for technical assistance for a certain period of time, and then whatever funds were not needed by the OCH for that technical assistance would go back to the partners. Obviously, that stands to change as we have discussion, but that's kind of where it sits with this policy.
This, Jennifer, I think what kind of disconnects for me is kind of this withholding versus keeping problem. So, I mean, in every grant I have with the government, the worst thing they do is hold my funding. They don't threaten to keep any part of it. And I think that's where this one took the extreme left turn for me. So I'm much more a fan of holding my funding. I mean, and that's common in just about every grant I sign, knowing that this is not a grant process, but let's face it, it looks like that. And so I'm much more a fan of a hold process while you come help than I am of a withholding that then goes into some punitive stage. And that's how this reads to me. And that was my original comment, is if somebody's struggling, isn't it the point that we help stand them up, not that we've taken out our stick? And so I would much rather see it be reworked into a supportive structure.
Any more discussion on the motion to discuss?
Really quickly, I would like to put out another request because it's sounding like this will come back to the Contract Management and Compliance Committee. And Stephanie Lewis definitely expressed in a call that we had earlier that the committee is very, very small. It's essentially staffed by myself and Elia, and Caitlin and Stephanie have been very gracious in participating. So again, if you work for an organization that does not have an implementation agreement contract with the OCH, I think it would be really helpful to get some other opinions on board and help us work through this process.
So you'll follow that up with a more formal email request as a result of the board meeting, so that those who weren't in attendance or others can be reminded to reflect on that. If you put a deadline on it, that'd be helpful. I think the sense that I have is that the group would like to send it back to committee with the consideration of more focus towards technical assistance partnering with compliance, and that whatever ramping we do towards withholds or delays are not going to be program killing, if that makes sense. So they're gradual. I'll just say, in the relationship that I have with the state, if we fail to meet certain targets, there are penalties associated with not meeting those service goals, but they're incremental. They're much smaller and incremental than 5%, 25% as described. So I think that was a significant reaction that many people had, but I think we're all in agreement that there needs to be some rails in place so that both staff and providers know what compliance looks like. Does that seem to wrap up the discussion for members? Any more discussion? Anything else in the chat box? Hearing no more discussion, I'm going to assume that the action we're taking is, as I paraphrased, that we'll send it back to committee. That makes sense? All right.
Agreed.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda, now, Elia, I wasn't sure if you were thinking of jettisoning this or still providing it, but the digital HIT Commons update.
Yeah, I could do this pretty quickly. I think what I just want to do, because there's been so much discussion about this, and this is my last board meeting with you all, is at least give you an update of where our best thinking is. If I could just have 5 minutes, Roy, and then we could turn it over to the ED search.
Absolutely.
Okie doke. And that's a Gen 2 baby penguin for those of you looking at the slides. A little comic or cute relief before I dive into a very complicated diagram. So essentially what we're working on here is the first phase, and it's in 2 phases. So what we heard from board members is concerns around data governance, concerns around data confidentiality. We've since contracted with a law firm who's working with us on our forms and making sure everything is dialed in and nice and tight, so that we could start putting people through the digital HIT Commons system. So there are 2 slides here, and I definitely will send these out that just show you kind of the different pieces that we're putting together to make everything compliant. And in this first slide, you have our temporary situation, which is, you know, right now there are business associates agreements being signed between partners, and I have as an example Port Angeles Fire, North Olympic Healthcare Network, and Olympic Personal Growth in Clallam, and they're putting DAAs in place to share information on shared clients. And there is, on the common side, a release of information, and that release of information is used kind of universally for all the partners. So there's one release of information that all the partners can use in order to share information. And then on the common side, there's an end user click-through agreement that in order to enter into the commons, you have to click that, you know, it's stock language about how you're going to use the data and enter the data. And the final thing is a sponsorship agreement, and this is not in place yet, but essentially what this is currently is OCH is working with those three entities listed, known, Prudential Aspire, and Olympic Personal Growth, to help them start getting information shared between each other and into the commons. So once we have all four of these documents in place, we'll be able to start to essentially fire up the digital HIT Commons. And it looks really clunky, and that's because we have a bunch of workarounds right now. And the reason we have those workarounds is the custodian of the data in this model is Quad Aim Partners. So it's a temporary kind of platform until we get to this model, which is a lot crisper, where what we're hearing from our legal team and what we're hearing from Greater Columbia ACH is that we form some sort of a legal entity or subsidiary agency, and then there's just one BAA and one end user agreement that all agencies sign, and it's the same, one ROI, and all of that goes into the Clallam Commons, which could or could not be a subsidiary of Olympic Community of Health. Essentially, that Clallam Commons would have an IT network operator, which could be Quad Aim Partners, and they follow all of the Medicare and Medicaid rules for data compliance, data destruction, etc. And doing this with two other ACHs would greatly reduce the cost, and we're hoping that King County ACH join in the effort. So I wanted to kind of share this, and I think even here I have a really kind of even more high-level bird's eye view of what this currently looks like in the Clallam NCC. Between known and OPG, the use case is medication-assisted treatment, and between known and Prudential Aspire, the use case is high ED utilizers. And we kind of scale out from there. And as we scale out more and more use cases, it becomes more and more cumbersome to do this in a patchwork fashion, which just further supports the need for a centralizing data governance structure like the Commons. So it took me a long time to figure out how to verbalize this, and I hope these images are helpful. And what I'm asking the board to do is to let the legal team kind of finish off its work. We are starting a learning collaborative with the other two ACHs to kind of share resources and share best practices and ideas. And we will come to the board with a proposal, probably maybe not in March, but maybe in the later months, depending on how the new ED search goes. And the process at Foster Pepper, which is our legal firm, with next steps. And before I open it up for questions, Maggie, because this is so confusing, did I miss any key point? Or is Rob on yet? I don't think he's on yet, but did I miss any key points?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. That's the update, Roy. I'll turn it over to you to see if there's any questions or if you want to move on.
Yeah, any questions around the HIT Commons? Of course, we're very excited about it. I have to say, when I was listening to you, I was visualizing needing to get multiple releases on the same client for multiple requirements that already exist for our existing programs, and trying to figure out if I can flatten that process down a bit in order to participate. So I think there's some devil in the detail, but I think a lot of us are very excited about the potential. And we're appreciative of those of you who've been beta testing it as well. Any more discussion on that, on the digital HIT? If not, I'll report out on behalf of the Search and Selection Committee. Many of you may be aware that we're deeply involved in this process. There were, I believe, over 100 applications that have come in, and several members of the search committee and staff reviewed those. The first round of interviews were held about 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago. We interviewed a number of people by phone, pared it down. We are now at the point of focusing in on a very specific finalist that we're very excited about. We have not had a chance to speak to them yet. We did have an executive and search committee meeting just at noon earlier today, and the committee. Well, let me just back up. There was actually we didn't act on any SBAR related to the search, have we?
Not yet.
Okay, so maybe I should be pulling back on this discussion a bit. So when was that sent out, Elia? Was that sent out this morning or yesterday?
It was sent out Thursday and recirculated, I think, this morning.
Okay, so it's not on the agenda. I'm sorry. I thought it was on the updated agenda. And so we need to add that to the agenda if we're going to take action on that.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, it's not listed as an action item on the agenda.
Do members have generally have copies of that SBAR related to the Executive Committee Search Committee's proposal? Is it up on your slide there? I'm actually bouncing back and forth between the agenda and the slide.
I just put it up. The
Okay.
motion's up on the slide, but I have the SBAR up now.
So that's the first step for us, is to see if the full board has confidence to authorize the search committee to move forward on the selection and recruitment process. I think there's a proposed motion at the bottom of that SBAR.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any more discussion on the SBAR itself? I think it's very consistent with our bylaws, but we appreciate having it codified here. Any more discussion, anything in the chat room? In the chat box?
Nothing in the chat.
All right. Well, anybody wanting to call a question on this motion?
I'll call.
Thank you, Dale. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Any abstentions? All right, motion carries. So to complete my report out, I'll say that the executive committee did agree to pursue a finalist. We will finalize reference checks and make contact with them, and also enter into negotiations based on the approval that you've just provided. And we'll report back as soon as we can. I think the subcommittee, the negotiating committee, there's a group of 3 of us who are going to be meeting on the phone at 4 o'clock today. So we hope to be able to give you some good news soon. There were quite a number of candidates that were interested, and we felt there were several good candidates, but we're very, very excited about this current finalist. So I guess that's the information that we have, and I don't know if there are questions that I can answer, or if other members of the committee want to add anything. Hearing none, I'll move us back to the regular agenda then. Anything else for the good of the order? Anything in the chat box?
This is Katie Eilers. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we would be remiss in not mentioning you. Go ahead, Katie.
Oh yeah, I was just going to share with everybody that this is my last OCH board meeting. I am moving on to a position as the Office Director for Family and Community Health at the Department of Health. So I submitted my resignation to Roy and Elia, and it's been a pleasure to work with all of you.
We're going to miss you, Katie, and I appreciate your comments. And in your letter, you mentioned some question about the sector that you represent and how that's different than other sectors, and that the board may want to consider how they want to continue to support that. So appreciate your service, and we wish you well in the future. And obviously, Elia,
Thank
you as
you.
well. Yes, thank you.
Congratulations, Katie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Elia, is there?
Katie?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, staff has the card for you, Katie. We'll pop that in the mail and make sure it gets to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry not to see them in person today.
Yeah.
And of course, this is Elia's last formal board meeting. Obviously, she's going to have trouble getting rid of us in some ways, which I think is fine. A little codependency here. And is there anything else that you wanted to share on this last board meeting day for you, Elia?
Thanks, Roy. I guess the thing I really want to communicate with everybody is, first of all, I've met this potential candidate that the Search and Transition Committee is talking to, and I am very excited about the future that OCH has with this candidate if that were to work out. And it gives me a great sense of peace to know that this organization that I've been a part of and that means so much to me and has really become part of my family is going to be in excellent hands, both with the staff and potentially this candidate. Working with you all has been the highlight of my career, and it is not easy for me to leave. And I appreciate all of the support and even some of the badgering because it makes me feel loved. So thank you, everybody. And I'm sure I'll run into you all over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I hope I get a chance to. And of course, I'm not dying. I'm just going to be traveling for a little while. So you'll probably all see me again at some point.
Elia, thank you for everything that you've brought and done with the OCH. It's been some amazing work.
Yes, thank you, Elia.
Thank you.
Indeed. We're certainly going to miss you, and still kind of in denial, but good that you'll be around for a few more weeks here, and really enjoyed working with you.
I ask that you all keep staying spicy.
Say that again?
Keep the board meeting spicy and interesting. It's what makes this board so incredibly special.
Well, it feels like it's fun still, hopefully, for everyone. All right, anything else for the good of the order? Anybody else signing off at this juncture? Nothing else to report? Okay, well, thank you all for being available on such an unusual day, and look forward to seeing everyone in person next month and hearing progress on these things. We'll certainly let folks know sooner than next month if we end up with a finalist that has accepted our offer, and we'll let you know as soon as we hear.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roy.
Thanks, Elia.
With that, we are adjourned.
Hey, thank you.